Before Sumer had a written language, before the ziggurats climbed out of the southern plain, there was a story about sleep, not ordinary sleep. The kind where the mind leaves the body and walks somewhere older than any word for it. The Sumerians recorded 12 things Enki was said to have told the first humans about their dreams. 12 warnings, 12 instructions, 12 doors. Read in the wrong order, they look like superstition. Read in the correct order, they read like a manual for a species that was never supposed to remember. And the 12th one, the last thing Enki was said to have whispered before the waters rose, is the one no priest wanted to copy twice. Modern researchers who chase the Anunnaki story argue that these 12 fragments were scattered on purpose, split between temple archives and the outer tablets, so that no single scribe would ever hold the whole set at once. Tonight we are putting them back in the order Enki reportedly gave them, 1 through 12, and we are ending on the one that made an entire priesthood go quiet. This is not a lecture on Mesopotamian archaeology. This is a walk through what Enki was said to know, in the order he was said to say it, ending where the tablets themselves seem to stop. Quick pause, and this is something new. For the first time since the 12 codes, there is a second document. It is called the 7 resets. Every time the world was erased, matched against the buried evidence, and the checklist of signs for the 8th. 4 are already active. Linked below, QR code on screen. That is all. Back to the video. The first thing Enki was said to have told them was that dreams are the first language. Older than Sumerian. Older than any script humans would ever carve into wet clay. According to the fragments, Enki explained that when the first humans were shaped, they were given a mind that could speak 2 ways. One way was the daylight way, the noise of tongues, the barter and the counting and the arguing over the boundaries of a field. The other way was the night way, the picture speech, the moving symbols. Everyone born on this planet, Enki reportedly said, already knows this language. No one needs to teach a child to dream. No one has to translate a symbol of falling water or a corridor of doors. The mind meets the picture and knows. That, Enki said, was not an accident. That was the receipt. Proof that humans were made from a template older than any word. This is why every culture, cut off from every other culture, ends up dreaming in the same set of symbols. Serpents, ladders, rivers, twins, empty rooms. Enki reportedly warned the first humans that this shared language was also something they were not to abandon, because the day humans stopped listening to their own night speech would be the day they lost contact with the part of themselves that had never fully come down from the older place. The earliest Sumerian dream priests, according to the fragments, were not treated as interpreters. They were treated as translators. Their job was not to invent a meaning for a strange picture. It was to help the dreamer remember a meaning the dreamer already carried underneath the noise of the day. The second thing was harder to accept. Enki reportedly said that dreams are memory that survived the erasure. To understand why that mattered, you have to remember what the Sumerians believed about time. They did not believe humanity was young. They believed humanity had been reset, wiped, started over, more than once. Everything that was written was drowned. Everything that was built was buried. But sleep, Enki said, was not something you could drown. Sleep was inside. Sleep was underneath. And so a small portion of what the older humans knew, the ones who lived before the last reset, was smuggled forward inside the sleeping mind. This is why, Enki reportedly warned, humans would sometimes dream of cities they had never seen with a floor plan they somehow recognized, or hear music in a dream in a scale that does not exist in their culture, or repeat a phrase in an ancient tongue with no idea where it came from. These, according to the tablets, were not creative inventions. They were leaks. Fragments from the humans who came before, riding forward inside the only container the resets could not destroy. And the more a person went to sleep expecting nothing, the more that container quietly filled again. Enki reportedly warned that the great danger was not that the humans of his day would forget the older knowledge. The danger was that they would grow ashamed of it. They would call it superstition. They would push it into the corner of children and old women. And once the daylight layer stopped treating the dream layer as real, the leaks would slow. Not stop, just slow enough that when the next reset came, there would be almost nothing left in the sleeping mind to survive with. The third thing Enki reportedly told them was about the seam. In dreams, the rules of the daylight world break. You walk through walls. You fly without wings. You know things you were never taught. You meet people who cannot be there. To the modern mind, this is proof that dreams are unreal. To Enki, according to the fragments, this was the opposite. The daylight world was the layer with the rules. The sleep world was the layer without them. And the seam between the two, the border where you could feel yourself slipping under, was the closest a human being would ever come to seeing how the world was actually built. Enke reportedly warned the first humans not to be afraid of that seam, because the moment they became afraid of it, they would start refusing to cross it. They would sleep less. They would drug themselves out of dreams. They would forget the picture language. And the layer without rules, he said, would slowly become inaccessible to them. The seam, in his words, was not a threat. The seam was a door. And a door that is never used is a door that eventually gets sealed from the other side. He is said to have warned that a sealed door does not simply stop letting things out, it also stops letting anything back in. The people on the far side of that seam, in his teaching, were also trying to reach us. Fragments of the dreamer's own older self, even parts of Enke himself. Every one of them needed the seam to stay open in order to make contact. Every night a human refused to dream or refused to remember what they had dreamed, another crack in the seam quietly closed. And the humans who lived closest to that seam, according to the fragments, the ones who took their dreams seriously as information rather than as noise, were the humans Enke could reach most easily when a warning had to be sent. The fourth thing was the one that made later scholars uncomfortable. Enke reportedly said that in dreams, the dead walk beside you, not as a metaphor, not as grief playing tricks. Later Sumerian priests tried to bury this instruction under layers of ritual, insisting that dream visits from the dead were only the memory of the living reproducing a face. But Enke, according to the older fragments, said something much stranger. The dead, he reportedly told the first humans, do not go far. They shift into a layer that overlaps with sleep. When you close your eyes, you tune to a frequency they can be reached on. Sometimes they come with news. Sometimes they come with unfinished words. Sometimes they come simply because they are still in the family and they still know your name. Enke reportedly warned that these encounters were not to be feared, but they were also not to be casually invited, because not everything that answers a name in a dream is the one you were calling for. Some things in that layer only wear a face because they know you will listen if they do. The rule Enke was said to have given was simple. If they speak first, listen. If you speak first, know exactly who you are calling for. The fragment suggests that the earliest humans took this rule so seriously that they built small rituals around the moment before sleep, in which they would name only the dead they actually wanted to reach, and refuse to name the ones they did not, because a name spoken at the edge of sleep was understood to be an invitation. Later, Sumerian priests watered this down into general prayers for the dead, which Enke reportedly would have considered dangerous, because a vague call in the dream layer was a call anything could answer. The fifth thing was that some dreams are direct messages. Enke reportedly told the first humans that he himself would sometimes step into their dreams to warn them, but not openly. Not with his own face, because Enlil, his brother and rival, kept watchers who monitored the dream layer for exactly this reason. Enke, according to the older fragments, was not supposed to be reaching down to the humans directly, so he spoke in symbols. Snakes coiled around trees, water rising in a doorway, a staircase leading up into open sky, a double axe, a ram, a jar being carried by the wrong hand. These, the fragments say, were his signatures. Codes his humans could learn to recognize while the watchers passed over the message as ordinary sleep noise. Enke reportedly warned the first humans that anyone who took the time to learn the language of his warning dreams would live longer than anyone who ignored them, and that, when a coming disaster was too large to fit in a single dream, he would send the same signature to many dreamers at once, in the same week, in the same region, so that at least one of them would understand and act. The pattern of shared prophetic dreams, he reportedly said, was itself a signal that a signature was being sent. This is why, according to the fragments, certain symbols keep appearing across cultures that had no way to speak to each other. A serpent around a tree in one continent, a staircase into the sky in another, a rising flood in a third. These were not accidents of the human imagination. They were remnants of the same signatures, resent through different generations of dreamers, in the hope that at least a few of them would carry the code forward until it was needed. The sixth thing was about the dreams that will not leave. Recurring dreams. The same building, the same argument, the same chase, down the same corridor, ending in the same locked door. Modern psychology explains these as unresolved emotion or unhealed trauma. Enke, according to the fragments, gave a colder explanation. A recurring dream, he reportedly said, is an assignment that was given to your soul before you were placed into this life. It was not finished. And the picture layer refuses to let it go until it is. Enke was reported to have warned the first humans that the mistake was to try to escape the recurring dream. You do not escape it. You walk it all the way through. awake, in your daily life. You go find the room the dream keeps showing you. You have the argument the dream keeps replaying. You knock on the door the dream keeps sealing. And the moment you do the thing in the waking world, the dream stops. According to the fragments, some of the earliest Sumerian courts even allowed a person to bring a recurring dream as evidence, arguing that the picture layer was pointing at something the daylight layer had not yet addressed. Enke, in short, treated recurring dreams as unfinished business the world itself was quietly pushing you to close. And he was said to have added a warning later generations mostly forgot. A recurring dream that is ignored long enough does not simply disappear, it goes quiet. It stops appearing at night. But the assignment underneath it does not close. It waits, and it collects a kind of interest in the form of small daytime misfortunes that seem unrelated to each other until the dreamer finally circles back and does the thing the picture had been asking for all along. Before we move to the seventh warning, stop for a second. What you just heard about the first 6 dream instructions only makes sense next to the 6 resets before it. Every ending erased the memory. Every reset rewrote the sleep. It is all in the 7 resets, linked below. QR is on your screen. The 7th thing Enke reportedly said was that nightmares are not random. This is where the tablets start to feel less like folklore and more like a warning. Enke, according to the fragments, told the first humans that if dreams were his gift, then nightmares were what came in through the same door once his enemies figured out the door existed. Enlil, his rival, did not want humanity to have the dream layer at all. When he could not close it, he reportedly began to send things through it, not to kill, to exhaust, to drain, to make humans afraid of sleep itself. The pattern, according to the tablets, is easy to recognize once you know what to look for. A nightmare that visits again and again. A nightmare that seems to know things it should not know. A nightmare that leaves you afraid to close your eyes the next night. That, Enke reportedly said, is not your own mind. That is something using your mind as a room. He gave the first humans instructions on how to close that room. Speak the intruder out loud in the morning. Name the fear in the daylight. Refuse to carry it silently. Because whatever came in through the sleep door only kept its power as long as you agreed not to talk about it. The moment you named it, the room emptied. Enke reportedly said that this was the reason ancient households had a rule about sharing a bad dream at the morning meal, before the fire had gone out, before the youngest child had left the room. It was not superstition. It was the closing of the door that had opened during the night. The 8th thing was about the moment sleep goes wrong. Sleep paralysis. You wake, but you cannot move. Sometimes there is a presence in the room. Sometimes there is weight on your chest. Sometimes there is a shape at the foot of the bed. Every culture on the planet has a name for this experience, which is itself strange. Enke reportedly told the first humans that sleep paralysis was the moment they were being observed. The dream layer, in his teaching, was not empty. It was populated, and most of what lived there was uninterested in humans. But every so often, something on the other side would notice a particular dreamer and want a closer look. When it looked, the dreamer felt watched, and the body froze, because the body knew it was being seen by something that was not supposed to have access to it. Enke reportedly gave a very specific instruction for this moment. Do not fight the body. Do not try to force yourself awake. Speak a name, not the name of the presence, your own name. Say it out loud if you can. Say it in your own voice, because in that layer, your name is the anchor that pulls the daylight layer back over you like a blanket. And the presence, most of the time, will lose interest and move on. Enke reportedly warned that people who ignored this instruction and stayed silent could be visited more than once. And the more times a dreamer was visited without pushing back, the more the presence learned the layout of the room, and the harder it became to close the door in later time. Enke reportedly told the first humans that time is not straight. It curves, it folds, it doubles back on itself. In the daylight layer, they could not see the curve, but in dreams, the mind slipped free of the schedule the body was living on, and could glance both directions, forward, backward, sideways. This, according to the tablets, was why some dreams came true. Not because the dreamer had powers, because the dreamer had briefly stepped out of the daylight schedule and seen a piece of the curve. Enke reportedly warned that these glimpses were not always literal. Sometimes what was seen was the shape of what was coming, not the exact details. A city on fire in a dream might mean a personal disaster, not a real fire. A death in a dream might mean the end of a chapter, not the end of a person. The rule he was said to give was to read the picture like poetry, not like a report. And most importantly, he reportedly said, do not tell everyone what you have seen, because a person who broadcasts every prophetic glimpse is a person the watchers begin to study. Carry them quietly. Act on them privately. That was the instruction the tablets seemed to preserve. And it may explain, according to the fragments, why the oldest dream traditions across every ancient culture insisted on secrecy around prophetic sleep. It was not modesty. It was safety. The 10th thing Enke reportedly said was that no dream is entirely your own. If two strangers, in different cities, in different lives, wake up and describe the same dream in the same week, that is not coincidence. That is not a trick of statistics. Enke, according to the fragments, told the first humans that all human dreams draw from a single archive, one source, one library, older than any of the tablets that would eventually try to describe it. When enough humans reach into the library at once, they sometimes pull out the same page. This is why entire cultures, separated by oceans, dream of floods, of dragons, of towers falling, of a bright figure descending. Enke reportedly said that these shared dreams were not proof that the same event had happened everywhere. They were proof that the archive existed, and that on nights when something in the archive was disturbed, the disturbance would ripple out into every human mind that was open enough to receive it. If you have ever woken from a dream that felt too big to be yours, Enke was said to have warned, it was probably not yours. You had reached into the shared shelf, and whatever was on that shelf had briefly reached back. According to the fragments, Enke said that during times of change, times of collapse, times when the daylight world was quietly breaking, the archive would begin to spill more than usual, and strangers would find themselves waking up to the same picture over and over without ever knowing why they had been chosen to receive it. The 11th thing was the memory of the descent. Dreams of falling. Every human has them. You start to drop, and your body jerks awake. Modern science calls this a hypnic jerk, and explains it as a nerve misfire. Enke, according to the fragments, gave a much older explanation. The fall, he reportedly told the first humans, is a memory, not from this life, from before. The Anunnaki themselves, according to the tablets, came down from something higher, a place, a vessel, a different sky. The first humans, shaped from that same lineage, carried a shadow of that descent inside them. Every night when the body relaxed enough to remember what it did not consciously know, the memory of that fall would rise for a second, and the body would flinch, because on the deepest level, the body still expected the ground to come. Enke reportedly said this was the reason the falling dream was so universal, so bodily, so hard to ignore. It was one of the few memories that survived every reset, because it was written not in the mind but in the flesh. And every time a human dreamed of falling, Enke was said to have added, they were briefly remembering a version of themselves that had once been much higher and had come down for reasons the daylight layer no longer had the words to explain. The tablets suggest that the fall dream would grow more frequent and more vivid in the generations closest to a coming reset, as if the body itself was rehearsing the descent again in advance. The 12th thing is the one that made the priests uneasy, and it is the reason we are ending here. Enke, according to the last of the 12 fragments, told the first humans that there was one kind of dream they should never dismiss, and one kind they should never repeat out loud in company. The dream of your own end. Not the dream where a stranger dies. Not the dream where a loved one is taken. The dream where you die and keep watching. You watch the room without you in it. You watch the people who knew you continuing without your face. You watch a version of the world where you are simply not there anymore, and the world does not miss a step. Modern psychology treats this as a fear dream, a processing of mortality. Enke, according to the fragments, said something much colder. This dream, he reportedly told the first humans, is not a warning about your personal death. It is a preview of humanity's death, the end of the chapter, the reset, and it repeats in generation after generation, because the reset is a fixed feature of this world, not an accident. The picture layer, he was said to have said, cannot help but leak this dream, because the archive contains it. Because every previous humanity that reached this point in its own chapter had the same dream in the same rising numbers before the end came. What made the priests bury the 12th instruction, according to the same fragments, was what Enke reportedly added at the very end. He told the first humans that when this dream begins to spread, when many people, in many places, begin to describe the same picture of watching their own absence, the reset is no longer far off. It is close, and the more people who dream it, the closer it is. This is why the 12th fragment was reportedly scattered, split between archives, handed to different priesthoods, marked with instructions not to copy it more than once, because a scribe who could see all 12 in the correct order ending on that instruction would understand what the picture layer had been trying to say all along, that the shared dream of watching your own ending is the archive itself warning you that the chapter is nearly over. And the reason we are ending on this one, in this order, tonight, is because for the first time in living memory, this dream is being reported by strangers in different countries, in numbers no one is willing to explain. Sleep researchers have begun to notice it as a category. Online forums have begun to fill with strangers describing the same picture in the same words. And if Enke was even partially right about the archive, then what those strangers are reaching into, without meaning to, is exactly the shelf he reportedly told the first humans would be the last to open before a reset. 12 things. In order, from the language older than any tongue, to the memory that survived erasure, to the seam, to the dead who walk beside you, to the warnings sent in symbols, to the assignments the dream will not let you drop, to the nightmares that come in through the same door, to the paralysis that is not yours, to the glimpses of the curve of time, to the archive that no one dreams alone from, to the descent written in the flesh, and finally to the dream of watching your own absence. Read in that order. The 12 stop looking like superstition. They start looking like an instruction manual left by someone who knew what was coming. And if the 12th instruction is right, then the pattern that has been quietly rising in dream reports around the world is not a trend. It is the archive doing exactly what Enke reportedly said it would do at this point in the chapter. Whether you take that as folklore or as warning is your decision to make in the daylight. But tonight, before you sleep, you will at least know what to listen for. Everything that happens next, from the 8th reset to the signs that are already active, to the timeline that connects the 12 dream instructions to the 6 resets before them, is inside the 7 resets. The link is below. The QR code is on your screen. And I would rather you have it and never need it than need it and not have it. Sleep well tonight and listen to what the picture layer sends you.